How important are large business meetings to corporate success? Well, I'm talking to Mindmeeting's Mike van der Vijver to find out. Really intrigued by your session. Essentially, what you're saying is that major meetings have quite an important effect on business strategy and business success. Are you sure that's the case?
I wouldn't have said it if I thought it wasn't. Yeah, I'm sure it does. And I think it is increasing in that the world's becoming ever more complex. And the time that there was one person who had all the wisdom is over. Well, maybe the wisdom, yes, but the knowledge, certainly not. And so, even in the top of organizations, there is much more of an awareness of board members, of CEOs, that in order to get the proper decision and also the proper buy-in, the proper support within their organizations for major changes, requires getting people together and having a real in-depth exchange of opinions, ideas, directions for their companies.
And I suppose that's right, because a lot of companies these days, it's very easy to stand out, difficult to stand out, but very important to stand out. And getting your whole organisation buy-in is a great way to turn those people into proper brand advocates. And not only that, but a lot of the key ideas that make businesses different come from the actual people themselves. So do you think that companies are doing this well enough?
I don't want to be nasty on people, but I always think that there's people who have a certain profession in that they sell razor blades or they operate on people, which is a perfectly respectable sort of business, and then there's other people who know about meetings, and that's the meeting professionals. So the short answer is no, and I don't blame people for that. There are lots and lots more possibilities. In the past it was easy, you just had a string of PowerPoints and that was it. Today nobody is not any longer satisfied with that. So audiences want something else. Organisers want something else. Meeting planners know that they need to come up with something which is better than just having people produce monologues. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to make meetings exceedingly better, actually.
Well, what's happening is that companies are holding meetings and they're spending money on meetings. So what you're saying really is, if they look at it in a different way, in maybe a more interactive and holistic way, they're actually going to get a lot more for the money, as well as improving their businesses.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't have put it better than the way you have.
And so, talking of like little baby steps, I mean, obviously, clearly with the right budget and with the right will, and we're saying anyway, as it will ultimately hit the bottom line, it is probably a good idea to consult a professional. But initially, what sort of things and what sort of factors should they be looking for from a professional when they commission one to look at the way that their meeting strategy is developing?
Yeah, well, I think the first and foremost thing is to be clear on what the objectives are. And what you hear a lot is meeting organisers, I call them meeting owners, since they don't really know about the way meetings function as a form of communication, they're unclear about what the objectives are. So they formulate them in terms of what I call process objectives. For instance, they say, well, it should be a good networking meeting. Yeah, so what does that mean? I mean, you put 50 people in a cowshed and I'll tell them to talk to one another and they will network. But is that what you want? So in my particular line of business, one of the most difficult parts is to actually get my meeting owner to be specific about what it is that he wants from a meeting. Now, I've given the networking example because it's an easy example. But if you look at what needs to happen with the content, if you look at what needs to happen to the physical experience of participants, you immediately see that it's not all that simple. And it's not all that simple for non-meeting professionals to come up with viable meeting objectives. So I think very early on in the process, people within all companies, people within other organizations need a hand from meeting professionals in order to come up with viable and reasonable objectives for their meetings. Now, that then leads on to coming up with a decent program, And then obviously after that you need to see whether your objectives have been achieved, and if they have, that's good, and if they haven't, why not? And then all of that, what should that lead on to as a knock-on effect on future editions of your specific meeting? And that latter part is another part which is often overlooked. So people do evaluations, but then they seem to sort of end up somewhere in a drawer, and next year nothing happens with them.
So I suppose continuity as well. If you stick with that particular meetings expert, they'll make you take it out of the drawer, look at it, and improve on it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which, by the way, and I hope it's not sort of politically incorrect to say here that that is a strong argument against tenders.
Indeed, Mike. Wonderful. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Okay, my pleasure.